Hi everyone, welcome to our short 15-minute video on Unit 739, Developing an Organisational Strategy for AI Readiness. I'm going to hand over to our tutor James, who's going to take you through the assignment. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Charlotte. Hello, everybody. Today, we're going to talk through the Developing an Organizational Strategy for AI Readiness assignment. This has a lot of DNA shared with the general strategy development unit that has been around for a long time. And straight away, I'll say there's two things to bear in mind when you're completing this assignment. One is to kind of thread AI throughout the whole assignment in the things you've got to consider, and we'll cover a few options for you as we go through this session. And when you come to develop the strategy itself towards the end, you might want to think about how you focus the strategy itself on something to do with installing or improving AI in your organization. And secondly, how AI can help you to develop and deliver that strategy itself. So kind of two tracks with this: how we use AI in the strategic environment generally, and how we can embed AI more in the organizations we work in. So just bear that in mind as we go through. Before we get going, just a quick reminder on the kind of three tips or rules, if you like, of how to answer academic questions for the assignments. Three simple approaches or reminders you can take into your answers. The first is to ensure that you scan each question and define any of the key terms or words in there that you think may be most relevant. So obviously a definition of organizational strategy as we go through this might be beneficial. Might be a few other areas we might want to just define a key term in a question as well. And in that way, you're setting out your own stall or your own parameters, your own reference points that you're going to use throughout your work. The next rule is always meet the command verb. You've been sent through a command verb list, a definitions list, which I strongly recommend you print out or have locally that you can refer back to as you write your answers. And it's the most common reason why work gets referred or failed when people haven't met the command verb. So the command verb's king and key in all these kind of questions. And final thing is less is more. And this is where, rather than focus on listing as many different things or factors or models as you can to potentially answer the question, at level 7 in particular, it's important that you make a definitive selection. So what is the fewest number of different models, factors, or considerations or arguments you can bring into your answer and still answer the question? That's a better way to approach it rather than sticking as many different things as you can think of in. Again, to remind you, it's definitions, command verb, and less is more. If you apply those rules to every question, honestly, it will go a long way to making your assignments a little bit healthier when you come to submit them. So let's go through here. We're looking at generally how we know how to develop and influence the organization's strategic direction through the development of a meaningful AI strategy. Let's get straight into it. The first learning outcome is to understand how to develop strategy. And the first question is to critique the factors which drive the development of organizational strategy. So advice here straight away is to put a really good definition down to begin with of what we mean by organizational strategy. There are plenty of authors on the subject, of course, that you can refer to here. But overall, it's important that you lay out what you believe organizational strategy to mean, and then you're going to kind of be a bit consistent with that definition that hopefully then throughout the rest of your work. So I'd start with the definition of organizational strategy to begin with at 1.1. The next thing is to look at the command verb, which is critique. If we quickly go on to our command verb definitions, you've been asked here to perform a detailed analysis and assessment of something, especially in literary, philosophical, or political theory. So it wants a detailed analysis and assessment of these factors. The idea here is the less is more rule translates into maybe choosing two internally focused factors that might do the job of driving organizational strategy development and two external ones as well. That would be a good way to kind of splice this together. Two internal factors, two external factors. If you wanted to make any mention of anything else honourable that kind of might also be major factors, that's fine. But for the purpose of providing a critique of the factors, you don't have the word count to do, I would say, more than two of each. So two internal, two external. Advice would be either paragraphs or bullet points for each. Perform a full critique of that factor in each place, and maybe an end summary paragraph to wrap the whole thing together as well. Because this is AI, we're going to be thinking straight away perhaps around things like the state of technology around AI in the marketplace, the trending of where it's going. It could be that we're looking at internal drivers around AI that could include the cost of implementation. It could be that you've got expectations from stakeholders that drive strategy towards or away from AI, depending on your sector, on your stated purpose, values, those kind of things might come into play here. So there's quite a bit to think around today as regards to these factors that might drive organizational strategy and how that interplays with AI as an emerging and trending field of interest right now. Be thinking around AI as you go through the answer there, but generally speaking, you've still got to make a good definition of broad organizational strategy and what you think drives it the most. 1.2 then is to critically appraise approaches for the development of strategy. So again, back to our golden rules here. If you haven't done in 1.1, you could put a very brief idea in there about what we mean by developing a strategy, but you've already kind of defined what organizational strategy means in 1.1. So probably not much to do in terms of definitions in 1.2 here. The command verb is critically appraise. So we need to go back to appraise for this as well. Assess and estimate the worth, value, quality, and performance. Consider carefully to form an opinion. So there's got to be some kind of view in there at some point. And to do it critically is to provide a systematic process used to identify strengths and weaknesses of information or to assess the usefulness and validity. So there's a bit of opinion making in here. And to apply some criticality to it would include not just what the different approaches are, but why they exist, how they work, what some of the compromises or impacts of those different approaches might be, different contexts within which one approach might be preferable to another, for example. That's the level of detail to perform that appraisal that we'd be looking for in your answers. Less is more here applies as well. So we're looking for not as many different approaches you can possibly throw at this, but to select, I would say, 2 to 4, probably 2 to 3 realistically. Typical examples in here to provide some nice critical contrasts would be planned approach versus emergent approach. And because this is an AI based themed assignment does not mean to say that those base approaches themselves would change necessarily, but it might be that AI changes the way that you can do them. So, for example, if you're looking at a planned approach, how does AI facilitate and dovetail into a more planned approach? For a more emergent approach, how might AI be utilized to give you more agility in the way that you assess the landscape, decide what to do next, etc., etc.? And what overall does AI do for organizations today and in the future that might affect the way that you do either planned or emergent, or the context around which might be better or worse in an organizational context? So there's a bit going on there for 1.2 to think around, but think around just the strategy and development strategy is not just one thing. There's not one magical solution to do it perfectly. Otherwise, we'd all have that and have the book and carry on. Strategy here is an expression of leadership philosophy. Strategy is choices under uncertainty. So there's a bit to think about with that. And again, how AI is disrupting the whole approach to developing strategy. 1.3 then is to discuss the challenges of developing and leading organizational strategy. So again, to apply our rules here, probably again, nothing maybe to define, except you might want to just make a distinction between how we develop a strategy versus what leading it means. So for example, you might talk about development as where you generate it and maintain it from. Leading might be to execute it over time in a real population of real people under real circumstances, maybe. So just to maybe just express that a little bit in your answer to start with. Your command verb here is discuss. Discuss is a bit like having an argument with yourself. What it requires you to do at level 7 is to give a detailed account, including a range, this is important, of views or opinions, and including contrasting perspectives. So it's a bit like looking at the same thing from different stakeholders or different views or different contexts. Where does it work? Where does it not work? What are the benefits? What are the negatives? A discussion doesn't necessarily need to lead to an overall synthesis or a view or a judgment or an evaluation of it in the end, but you might flirt with a bit of an idea around what you think overall as part of the discussion. But the main thing is to make sure you've got contrasting perspectives brought into the thing as you perform a discussion for your answer. So the challenges then of developing leading, this might lend itself to, again, a paragraph or a kind of bullet point type structure where you're looking at what are the challenges of developing organizational strategy and what are the challenges of leading it as well. They're two separate things described in the question. You need to meet both of them in the answer as well. And in terms of those challenges and how it looks with AI, well, one of the big things for me, of course, would be just the pace of development change of the technology and what it means in organizations, in technical terms, in capability development, in societal impact terms. It's a very, very fast changing landscape. So by the time we develop something, it may already be too late or it might be outdated. And as you try to lead something again, it might well be that the things you thought you were trying to capture to begin with no longer hold true after a few months or what have you. So there's lots of different challenges within that, I think. You might also think about challenges of leading strategy with the AI world in terms of what does your CEO or main sponsors or main leadership team feel and want to get from AI? That may well vary. You might get technological champions who come in and run 100 miles an hour towards the technology, or the ones who want to put the brakes on and want to deny it. So what happens when leadership changes? What happens when new technologies emerge? What happens when new news comes out in the media and we have to respond to that? So there's lots of different challenges around this for sure, I would suggest. Maybe some opportunities within that as well. You could think about as point of your discussion. AI might give you capabilities that we lacked before to develop strategy and lead across it. But again, in indicative content, make sure in your answer somewhere, again, that you've gained good, strong tie into themes around AI as you do discuss those challenges. Okay, second learning outcome here, we're going to know how to develop strategy now. These are two questions designed basically to demonstrate that you can apply your thinking to develop an organizational strategy in the real applied context, in your organizational context, that has a lot to do with AI. And again, just to remind, this strategy should be focused on the development, deployment, implementation, or improvement of AI in your workplace. And also, you might want to think around how you use the tools and capabilities of AI in order to itself develop and monitor and lead and implement the strategy that you've thought about. So there's a couple of different things to consider here to integrate this into your answers. 2.1, develop an organizational strategy to achieve a business objective. Now, develop is to elaborate, expand, or progress an idea from a starting point, building upon given information. Now, the given information in this context is your business objective. So I always think that in order to meet develop really well, it's really useful to start with a premise, start with a problem or an opportunity that you've got in the business or the organization or the objective, the business objective overall. And how does AI then become some form of solution to that business objective or that problem? So develop means kind of from a starting point onward, you've got to show the workings out, where it's come from, the problem that your strategy is designed to try to address or mitigate or solve for. The command verb, so the command verb is develop. In terms of definitions here, you just might define what the business objective is. That's the obvious one here. And to show that development here with AI in mind, again, just bear in mind that the strategy itself should refer to how to install or improve the way AI is used in your organization in some way, shape, or form. Again, there's lots of examples in indicative content you could think of to do with how we do personal and professional development more using AI, or how we look at efficiency monitoring, how we integrate AI into our workflows and processes, all that kind of stuff. The development of the strategy is in 2.1, and then the approach to implement and monitor that strategy to ensure its success lives in 2.2. And in 2.2, what I'd recommend you to consider is to introduce here some change theory, look at some models around, for example, Kotter or Kubler-Ross, and how we manage to put in place a change, put in place a strategy in the real world and monitor its success. Again, we're looking at perhaps a three different stage approach here: implementation, looking at the milestones, monitoring them, reporting back on them, communicating them back, learning from what we're actually seeing in the real world. You might also put into here, and I would recommend you do that with AI in particular, some register of some key risks that you perceive around AI and its implementation in the workplace, and what you intend to do to mitigate for the particular risks that you've identified. And you might want to as well go back to 1.2 and the different approaches developing strategy, and select an approach based on your particular context and your particular strategy here in this learning outcome as well. So kind of feeding back into the work you've done in learning outcome 1 and applying it in learning outcome 2. There are lots of opportunities, lots of threats, lots of ethical considerations for some organizations around how AI is used and deployed and monitored in organizations, down to the models you're using, where your data sits and how tight that is, abuses of it, people's individual adoption of the technology, so that we're trying to get humans in the loop in critical components and not allowing people just to frankly bash it into a model and then just shipping the results on without any kind of cognitive oversight of what happens there. We've already seen some organizations fall foul of this kind of behaviors, which I'm sure you'll be aware of. And so I think one of the big questions is, given that this technology is here, how does your organization attempt to ingest it, utilize it, mitigate some of the potential risks around that as well. And one big uncomfortable question around the whole thing for you will be, many organizations, how do you square off the adoption of AI, automated systems, and efficiency improvements against your desire or requirement and mandate to employ people along the way? Because the way that we've generated productivity in the past has generally been through use of people and what looks in context now like limited technical solutions and what have you in automated systems. Now that seems to be changing a little bit. And for many of us, we've got some pretty philosophical questions to answer around what organizations are here to actually do and to what extent you can try to perform some kind of social function and supporting jobs in your organization, and to what extent actually for you it is just pure economics that drives your decisions when it comes down to it, and we might need to reprogram some of our thinking as leaders around that. So those questions are for you to decide on, but just for this assignment, make sure that you've got a good thread of AI throughout it, but ultimately it's a good solid strategy as well.
Thank you very much, James. We hope that you found that useful, and we look forward to receiving your assignments very soon. If you've got any questions, just drop us an email on cmi@impd.co.uk. Thanks a lot.